Yo, everybody, welcome back to the channel, and welcome back, Will. Good to have you again, buddy.
Nice to be here, Jeff. Excited to look at some new footage.
Dude, bikes. I love bikes. You know what we have today? We have some more fan footage. This one's submitted by Keith. Not even going to try your last name, Keith, but thank you for submitting your footage. By the way, guys, if you want to submit your footage, we're going to drop a link in the description. It takes a couple minutes of your time. If you want us to roast your footage, I don't think we're too bad, though, are we?
No, I think we give fair credit where it's due.
But in this case, this is a Cat 4 race, the Bayview Classic at Tour of America's Dairyland. The two notes in Keith's submittal that he said is, number one, he needs to tighten up his corners. He takes them wider than he needs to. And number two, he needs to close gaps sooner. And I, after looking at this footage, I will agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's just some little fundamentals that can be tweaked, and he'll be a lot better racer for it.
And fun fact, Keith also said he's a member of the Couch to Crit Masterclass. And in case you guys don't know what that is, it is a course I developed over the last 15 years, to be honest. But it is an online course with all of the tips and tricks that I have developed. Basically, if I could go back in time and take myself from 15 years ago and be like, hey, here's how to race bikes, it's all included in this course, including training plans. And the best part is on sale now through December 10th. I'll leave a link in the description. There are scholarships available if money's tight. What do you think, Will? Should we talk about a bike race?
Yeah, let's give Keith some pointers and maybe learn some stuff for ourselves.
All right, Will, so you've been out at Toad. I have not. Tell me about the Bayview Classic. What's this course all about?
Yeah, this one, I mean, you can see it's got a lot of corners in it. There is this straight. So between corner 1 and 2, there's a little bit of a headwind here. It kind of gets funneled into you. And then this next straight also feels like kind of an uphill. You get hit with some weird wind as well. And after this tight corner, you're kind of coming from 19 miles an hour. So a few corners that are tricky, and then the rest are just wide enough to give you too many options in the corner. And Keith takes the wider line most of the time. You can see he took the wider line in that second or in the third corner there, and then he's already on the outside for the next one, which he had to cross over the field essentially to take this also wide line. But
I like that he's taking the wide line because I can tell he's aware of the wind. He even put that in his notes. He was very aware of the wind, which was strong on this particular day. And look at the wind direction here. So it's coming from left to right. And so he was on the right side through that last corner, but he just wasn't tight enough. He just needed to be closer to the hip of the rider in front of him to benefit from that draft. So it's like it's a two-step process. He's got part one, be aware of the wind, be sheltered from the wind. This is the main thing we're fighting in bike racing after all. But in order to benefit from it, you have to be a little bit tighter against the riders next to you. And I get it. It can be a little bit sketchy riding right on somebody's hip, right, Will?
Yeah, I definitely can. The last time we covered this race, I actually got hit by somebody's hip, which I'm sure we can throw a clip in. But I think it's important to have large reaction times too, look up the road just so you can react to stuff that's coming, that you don't have to react to the guy immediately in front of you. But some bumping drills can help with this too. Just get in some grass with your buddies and bump hips. It can be super fun fighting for corners. Cyclocross can help a bunch too. Help you not have giant gaps like this because you're saving energy.
Yeah, I do like that he slotted in here and he's getting some draft. But again, you can see he just gets out of that slipstream, goes a little bit wide through this corner. That'll be kind of a trend. And in fairness, this is something that Keith pointed out he's working on. So yeah, of course, contained in the masterclass are how to do bump drills and how to try to remedy these issues. But again, really wide right here, right? Spending a lot of time out of the draft, up over 800 watts. And coming back to something you said about awareness of what's going on, not just to the rider directly in front of you, but maybe 3 or 5 or 10 riders in front of you, is so important and such an underestimated skill in bike racing. I have this anecdote that I've told in, I think, another video on this channel, but it's worth mentioning again because one time here in the Bay Area, I was riding up the peninsula, this big fast group ride, and my friend was making a one-way trip going up the peninsula to visit his girlfriend or something like that. So he had this big hiking backpack on, up over his shoulders, and I was like, oh sweet, I'm gonna follow my friend all day and I'm gonna have extra draft, right? Extra draft for me. But Will, you might see the problem with this logic, and that is I can't see around the backpack. So I can't do that trick that we were just talking about, which is seeing what's going on 5-10 riders in front of you. And that's the magic of like smooth riding, because don't forget, guys, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you have to like anticipate what's happening, and that's something that Keith is kind of learning here, and he's aware of it. He's like working on it, but it's a little bit tricky this early on in his path as a cyclist. So you can see again, as I was talking, he was just kind of doing a lot of the same thing, and his heart rate's at 170 beats per minute as a result. Let's fast forward a little bit, see if he can try to sort this out. Yeah, so we fast forward. We're about halfway through this race. These are short races, guys. Cat 4 field races for about 35 minutes, and one thing he needs to focus on, and it's taken him about half this race to do so, is like get yourself in better position. What I often find in these races is you can benefit so much just by like maintaining top 10 placement, because you don't have to deal with these gaps that open up. You guys saw in that last clip like how many times these little gaps open up, and Keith was doing a lot of the stitching up of those gaps. And this is yet another reason why it's a good idea to stay close to the front. A crash on the left in case you missed. That looked like the race leader. Was that the race leader, Will?
It was, I think, like the junior race leader. There are combined fields here. So, yeah, he had a leader's jersey on. That is not going to be good for him for the rest of the week.
And he was up at Keith was up at 750, 800 watts again. I don't know if the crash had much to do with that. It couldn't have helped, that's for sure. But it was, again, just taking those again, right here, as I'm saying it, again, those wide outside lines. What you're looking for is that little blue bar on the bottom left, is power meter. There are a couple of ways to race a crit and have the same average power. One is to stay at 250 the entire race, and that would be really chill. Your heart rate would be 150 beats per minute or something, and you would have plenty of energy left over for the sprint. The other way is to kind of do what Keith is doing here. Sorry, Keith, but up at 800, back at 0. Up at 800, back at 0. It's also averaging about 250, but you're way more tired as a result. That's what you're trying to avoid. And I think that we're going to kind of skip towards a lot of the rest of this race, because it's a lot of this, kind of him figuring it out. Let's see how the last couple laps play out. All right, so we're coming through. I think this is 2 laps to go. Bitter end of this race. And we're going to learn here in a minute why maintaining good position is a good idea for a number of reasons, right? We already saw the crash that happened. You're avoiding the potential of getting tangled up in a crash, which obviously is really bad, but also it means that you're slowing down and having to use a lot of power. But look at, see this rider on the left, obviously just cooked. His day was done just going backwards. And now all these gaps are going to start opening up. And now when I'm looking at this, Will, I'm thinking the alarm bells are going off. If I'm in Keith's position, I'm like, I must move up as soon as possible, because everyone now is struggling. I mean, he's losing the wheel at 700 watts, and that's because people are desperate to stitch it up. What are your thoughts, being somebody who's done a million crits, Will?
Yeah, some crits don't race like this, but this course does, and I kind of like crits like this, where you just get good position, and everybody else behind you is going to be hurting way more. Rain tends to do this to crits a lot, too, where you'll be, 20 minutes from the end of a rainy crit, you look back, and there's 3 guys behind you, and there were 100 before, and it's one of the best feelings. As long as you're not needing a break and wanting to move back through the field, it's awesome to just have been paying attention to the race in front of you the whole time, and then guys are just popping behind you. We call those very negative races, where you're just losing people the entire time. Those are one of my favorite ways to race, where it's just kind of an attrition thing, but it's a lot of skill, and right here, I'm afraid Keith is actually a victim to that attrition, to that negative racing. He's got a big gap from him to the field, and this is a rough place to be, especially at the end of the race where you're probably pretty cooked. His heart rate is very high, and this hurts. You're doing everything you can just to get a top 20 in this race. Those guys on the left there, their day's over. No free laps for them, so they're going to have to get back on the bike and finish up here. So Keith is going to have to decide whether or not he wants to just power through the rest of this race.
Last lap, dig.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great feeling. I just want to reiterate something that you said. When you're in that position where you look back, you're this deep into a crit, you look back and you're like, oh, I'm the last rider. There's only 7 of us left. That's kind of what it looks like in this case. There's a small group towards the front right now. Everyone's benefiting from the draft, and then everyone else behind, including Keith here, our protagonist, is struggling. And even if Keith does make it, even if the Pink Sox here in front of him does make it, they're cooked for the sprint, right? The position you want to be in this late in the race is saving energy as much as possible, not burning it just to get back on terms. So unfortunately, as you probably guessed about half a lap ago, this is essentially the end of Keith's race. He still had a decent result, right? He was still 26th out of 62. He did end up getting his first win earlier this year, so really stoked every time I get those emails from Couch to Crit Masterclass members talking about how they're getting these big gains in their FDP or how they're winning their first race. Motivates me to continue what we're doing over here. So Will, that's it for today's race. Thanks for coming on, man. And Keith, if you're listening to this, feel free to submit the footage of you winning. We'd love to share it on the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in the next one.